I'm going to hit record. There we go. So you had brought this up yesterday, and I think we could talk about it more. And it's not it's not the Thera Gun text I got at 8:30.
You'll just trust me.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it. But I'm going to cut that part out because people are going to be like, what?
No, you shouldn't cut that. I'll make them wonder. Listen, if they really want to find out the answer to what I told you about the Thera Gun, then they need to, reach out, have a conversation, consider working with us. After we work with them for a few years and a level of trust and personal connection is established, we'll open that particular kimono.
Maybe a gated how-to blog post?
Absolutely. I would be happy to do that for anyone that would be interested in learning the arcane arts of the Thera Gun.
So you had told me that you had read the post about nonprofits having a branding challenge. So I thought that would be a good place to start. So last week we released a post about how nonprofits should not be presenting themselves as such, that you are not defined by your tax designation.
Yeah, or like you're not defined by what you don't do. It's the fact that you are for impact, not nonprofit. And I'm pretty sure, I feel like I came up with that at some point, which makes me believe that because I think that, you actually said it, and then I co-opted it and made it my own because that's literally the definition of our, decade plus career together.
Yeah, I actually remember the day I said it, and I ripped it off from somebody. I ripped it off from Simon Sinek, who just said it in passing in a podcast. Whether or not it becomes more part of his IP, I do not know. But it stuck with me because that's the reality of nonprofits right now, is that they have this strange way of presenting themselves where it's like, yeah, we're not for profit. And there's still that outstanding question of, okay, well then I'm left wondering what it is that you actually do.
Well, one of the, from way back in our past, one of the nonprofits that has always stood out to me, is a local one, a smaller local company that we worked with more than a decade ago at this point. And they're called Dean's Beans, and they're a coffee roaster out of Orange, Massachusetts. And what's funny is that I have always had a special place in my heart for their particular business model, because I will be the first to admit that I am a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist that believes that capitalism is the greatest force for good in human history, and it has done more to improve the human condition than any other financial system, philosophy, or other, all the other things you put in the other category that has ever existed. And
wow,
yeah, no, I'm a deep believer in that. Dean took the idea of cap. He said, I have a deep need to work with and improve the lives of the indigenous peoples that are working on these coffee farms, that are producing coffee for the rest of the world and not really seeing the benefit from the existing system. Oddly enough, they're not seeing the benefit from the existing capitalist system. So isn't that interesting? So instead of going out and trying to raise money or ask for donations, he said, I'm going to work with them to create a product that is then going to cycle back to them to help improve their particular condition. And I've always felt that that is such an interesting way to look at philanthropy, where he is not asking for something to be given, he is creating a product that is in demand and using that demand to then go out and help specific groups. And it just always struck me like, wow, this could be something that anyone that finds themselves in a situation where they would like their life to focus on the more of a social impact, this is a way that they can leverage the existing system of consumer focused consumption to instead go out and not ask for donations, but create the funding they need to further the mission that they're on. So that's kind of where that whole for me, where that really rang true is the whole, you're not nonprofit, you're for impact. I look at the impact that Dean has had on these farmers over the past 30 plus 40 years that he's been putting forth that effort.
And I think an important point here is that there are a lot of organizations that classify themselves as nonprofit that do have a significant impact. So we're not talking about just their business structure alone, although sometimes that does need some help. But we are talking about how a nonprofit presents itself to the world. And what's interesting about it is that we're sort of taught in this country to define things that exist to us by looking at their opposites. And this is one space where that doesn't help. So you don't understand extreme heat until you've experienced extreme cold, or at least you can imagine it. Up is defined by down, so it's really interesting that here we have a classification that doesn't help people better understand what it is that is going on with that organization. So, if you say, "Oh, I run a nonprofit," all people hear is, "Okay, so you don't make any money."
Well, not only that, but it also creates a negative perception of the word profit, and somehow that being profitable is a negative thing, or something that if one wishes to do good in the world, one cannot be profitable, and that is simply and demonstrably not the case.
Yeah, and it's so in the consumer mindset, which is often the folks that are receiving these messages, it's a give-get equation. And if a nonprofit reaches out and says, "We'd like you to donate to our cause," as you'll soon see in this week's comic, they can grab followers and people that will evangelize a non-existent mission because they experience it internally. Intrinsically, they know what it feels like to be a part of that nonprofit, but they can't articulate it to the world because they haven't stopped to look at the greater impact of the organization, only the impact that it has on them.
So how does a nonprofit do that initial introspective work of looking at their message, looking at themselves, and saying what can we do, or even how could we execute on a change or an adjustment that is going to make us less about what we're not and more about what we are?
It really comes down to looking at that impact piece and saying, let's create a give-get proposition. If you give money to my organization as a 501c3 nonprofit, what do you get in return? Now, a lot of people give money because it makes them feel great about supporting a specific cause. There are tax benefits to giving money to a nonprofit organization. But ultimately, it comes down to saying, who do we impact and how are you helping them?
So I think what you're touching on there is actually showcased well by One Tree Planted, which is a
Yes.
nonprofit. And I mean, look at that. Their very name, their very URL, and their very proposition is, for every dollar you give, you will plant a tree. Is that kind of the direct correlation that you're talking about?
Yeah, it needs to, at the level of the general giving place, and not all nonprofits are run in a way that they expect to have an annual fund and have fundraising and all that stuff, and need to be supported by donations. But a lot of them cover their deficit with support from people. So if you're looking at One Tree Planted as an example, or that message anyways, because I don't know if they're a registered nonprofit or not, but that is a great way to boil it down. And we see for-profit and consumer facing entities do this all the time. One that I think of is called established titles. And for a small fee, you can become a lord or a lady because they will sell you a block of land in Scotland. And you can use that title, like you can say on your airplane ticket, you can say, I'm Lord Jim Pond. Which, if you haven't discovered this yet,
I can't. No, this is immediately being done because I'll be complete. My ego will not allow it to not happen for me.
And they show you your.
So it's not like that thing that sold you a star. Remember that? Because that was a total ripoff game. There's no body that sells the name of a star for you. Yeah. This isn't like that. This is real.
You purchase a tract of land in Scotland, and
is it hereditary title, or
I don't know.
I don't know how that works.
But at the end of the day, this is about preserving
that land. Yeah.
And so they're selling off little blocks of it. And you know what? You could travel. They show you on a map where your land is. You could travel to Scotland and visit your little spot.
Was it like a 1 square foot?
I think it's bigger than that, but I don't
that's
remember.
Not bad. So you could maybe even stand on it if you
could
wanted.
probably stand on it.
It's funny the connection that you've made with kind of what you give and what you get, because and it just dawned on me now while you were talking about that. When we made a decision to go not just carbon neutral, but carbon negative, and what was behind that, we wanted to be able to say to anyone that worked with us, for every pound of a carbon that your advertising puts into the atmosphere, we're going to remove 2. So, and for me, that was a very important thing to do, because while being number one, a diehard capitalist, I'm also a huge environmentalist, and I believe that the two are interconnected, and each of them can work together to improve the other. I'm, personally, the work that I put into my property, buying an old sand pit and revitalizing it, bringing in topsoil, bringing in bees, bringing in wildflowers, et cetera, all of those things are done, one, from the standpoint of appreciating that beauty, but two, when I was looking at the idea of building a home, I said, why tear down a forest to build my home? Why don't I take something that has been destroyed by industrial effort and recreate its value far beyond where it probably even was before it was destroyed? And that's what led to this idea of having this carbon negative promise that we keep as an organization. We don't really tout it a lot. We don't we have a blog post about it where we talk about why it exists, but for me, and I always appreciate you, John, and Lori, backing up my desire to do this, was that for me, it wasn't enough to be negative, to not have an impact. Like not having an impact, to be neutral, not having impact wasn't enough. I wanted us to be improving things by the very act of every single impression, every ad that is run takes a little bit of carbon, out of our atmosphere and can help improve the overall state of the ecology of the planet. And for me, that was a great thing. I know that you have things that the company supports that you're interested in, and as do the other partners. But this was one that was very, very close to me. So it's interesting that we kind of did that before this discussion even happened. It was intrinsic for us.
Yeah, and it lines right up with the idea of that you always say, which is to do nothing is to not do something. Well, it's the same here. It's like if you're neutral, you're just not doing anything. You're not picking a side. You're not there. There are people in the burning building, and you're not running in to get them out. You're just standing there watching it burn. And that's probably another conversation for another time. But do we not have a similar challenge with how people look at the environment and how people look at global warming, for example? Just the name global warming alone does not do justice to the challenge.
It doesn't help it at all, because the minute people conflate warmth and temperature with weather, and this is not a weather challenge, it's an overall climate challenge. And
but is it not a human challenge? Because guess what? The planet's going to be fine.
Oh yeah, we're all gone tomorrow. Earth just moves on. It has through many, many of those situations.
So even as a kid, when I saw, and I appreciate the efforts, like I'm not saying like they're bad, but like save the planet. Well, yeah, the planet does need to be saved, but it needs to be saved because everyone's going to die.
It's actually save humanity. It's kind of along the same lines, and I know that now we're just going down a tangent, which I guess is totally fine.
This is tangents.
Yeah. So, but you look at the highly wealthy individuals like Musk and Bezos that are, they're getting heat for, why Mars? And why don't we focus on this planet? And folks are not taking that one more leap by looking at something like Mars and making something like Mars habitable to some degree. We are going to find technologies, processes that are going to allow us to improve this planet. And that's something that we do forget, that sometimes the answer isn't as direct as you would like it to be. And the selling of those ideas, right? This for that, right? Well, go, as Schwarzenegger would say, get your ass to Mars, and then we're going to be able to come back, not, physically. What I'm saying is that by doing that, we're going to help ourselves. And I think that ties all the way back to the idea of a lot of these organizations that are trying to do good. It's here's how you do good, and here's the interconnectivity of doing well for yourself and doing well for others and making that connection. And too often, only one side of that story is told.
Yeah, I see the world through the lens of brand, and I just see so many branding challenges. Like, brand is the art of building trust. And going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, who trusts you when you say, I'm not profitable? Who trusts you when you say the globe is warming? And
well, it leaves too much up for interpretation and demonization and co-opting of the message, which can happen with any message that is not properly delivered can be destroyed. And even when it's properly delivered, it can be destroyed. So you're doing yourself absolutely no favors.
Yeah, it's one of our sayings here is that I think you came up with this one. I'll give you credit for that.
I will take that credit.
Nature abhors a vacuum. I don't know if you came up with it or you
No,
heard it
God,
somewhere.
that one's been around.
That might
one's
be
been
like a
around
Stephen Hawking quote or something.
No, it's way before.
Yeah.
Well, because it's nature abhors a vacuum, power abhors a vacuum. Vacuums, even space isn't a true vacuum. There's still particulate matter. There's still stuff. So anytime a company leaves or an organization leaves a communication vacuum, it will be filled by someone. And those you have PR organizations that fill a particular niche there. But on the brand side, if you're not controlling and addressing the conversation around your brand, I guarantee you that your consumers and those that are, in air quotes, set against you, your competition, will be more than happy to fill that void.